Hey guys, what's up? LJS here with a deck profile. Finally, my first deck profile. And today I'll be talking a deck profile on Revenger Dragruler Phantom Dragon deck. Nah, I'm just kidding. It's Raging Form Dragon deck. Well, some of you may be thinking, oh, it's post set 13. Why are you doing a set 12 deck? Well, first of all, I'm still pretty new to this channel, so I want to make deck profiles of some of my older decks that are still relevant. Secondly, I didn't really have much time to playtest my set 13 decks, so I don't have time to tweak it. And finally, despite being a set 12 deck, I think Raging Form Dragon is still a pretty relevant deck right now in this current meta, despite being a set 13 meta. Because in Japan, if I'm not mistaken, Raging Form is a top tier deck all the way from set 12 until set 15. So yeah, it's been topping tournaments like crazy. So yeah, before we get to the deck profile, let's talk about the general idea of the deck. So the idea of the deck is from early game to mid game, you get a consistent field set up with cards like Revenger Claudius, Darkborn Trumpeter, Revenger Tartu, and your Revenger Moderate Phantom. So these cards turn Counterblast into free units onto your field while saving your hand size. You also have access to control cards like Dark Revenger to kill off pesky opponent rear guards, and you have Revenger Dorint to help you gain back those Counterblasts you use to call units. And finally, for endgame, you finish off with your boss, Raging Form Dragon, which basically he kills off the free units you get to restand himself for finishing hits, for final turn pushes. So with the general idea out of the way, let's talk about the deck. So for the starter, I run Claudius. Her skill is basically Counterblast 1, put this unit into the soul. If you have a grade 3 or greater Shadow Paladin Vanguard, search your deck for one card named Blasted Dark Revenger and call it to R. So basically, you convert her into a Blasted Dark Revenger with a cost of Counterblast 1. The only restriction is that you must have a grade 3 Vanguard and you can only call Blasted Dark Revenger. But it's pretty good, I guess. I use her mainly to combo, to call Blasted Dark Revenger to do a combo, which I'll explain later. Another alternate starter you can run is the Creeping Dark Goat, which is the grade 3 searcher. I don't have the grade 3 searcher because it's expensive and it's pretty rare. So I'm just left with her, but she works fine. Yeah, so for the grade 3s, I run for Raging Form Dragon, the boss of this deck. So essentially his skill is Limit Break 4, choose 3 of your rear guards with Revenger in his card name, retire them, and at the end of the battle that this unit attacked, after this guy attacked, you can pay the cost, which is kill the 3 rear guards, and then you choose a Revenger Raging Form Dragon from your hand, write it as 10, and the Vanguard gets 10k until another turn. So essentially, after he attacks, kill 3 Revengers. If you have him in your hand, kill 3 Revengers, write him from your hand as 10, and he gets an extra 10k. So essentially, he can attack again for 21k. So as mentioned earlier, you have support cards that gets free units. So essentially, you want to call free units early game and use him to kill off those units to restand to push for game. So next, for grade 3s, I run 4 Moderate Phantoms, your Break Ride. So this guy essentially, basically, when the Shadow Paladin rides this unit, you may pay the cost, which is Counterblast 1. If you do choose your Vanguard, a typical 10k, your Vanguard gets 10k, and you search your deck for up to 1 grade 2 or less Shadow Paladin, call it to rear. So essentially, when you ride over him, you Counterblast 1, get a free call, grade 2 or lower from the deck. So this guy opens up possibilities for combos, which I'll explain later as well in the game playing section. So for those are grade 3s. Oh, and also the reason you want to run Creeping Dark Goat is because to get Raging Form skill off, you need another of him in your hand. So Creepy Vanguard is basically a great researcher, so essentially you use him to search for more copies of Raging Form to put in your hand to use for late game. But of course it's chance based, you only get to check the top 5 cards, so it depends on your luck. So for grade 2s, I run 4 Dark Revenger. So his skill is, when this unit is placed on the Vanguard or Rearguard circle, if you have a Vanguard with Revenger in a name, you can counterblast 2 and kill a Rearguard in the front row from your opponent. Yeah, retired. So basically, he is the control unit you have to help control your opponent's field, and he's also useful for a combo which I'll explain later as well. Next, I run 4 Dark Cloak Revenger Tower 2. So her skill is, when she's placed on the Vanguard or Rearguard circle, if you have a Shadow Paladin Vanguard, you can counterblast 2. If you do, search your deck for one grade 1 or less card with Revenger in his card name and call it into R in the same column as the unit. So she's essentially a free call, counterblast 2, free call, but with the limit that you must call a Revenger and it must be behind her, and it has, in the same column as her, and it must be grade 1 or lower. So this is another card that allows you to have free calls to be used to kill off for the boss. Next, I run 4 Revenger Masquerade, your typical 12k attacker. So basically when it attacks, if you have a Revenger Vanguard, he gains 3k, so it's a 12k attacker. So now for grade 1s, I run 4 Revenger Dorint. So this guy, her skill is that whenever a Dark Revenger is called on Vanguard or Rearguard in the same column as this unit, you get unflip 1 damage. So essentially, if you call like that or like that, you get unflip 1 damage. So this is another reason why you run 4 Dark Revenger, just to get this gimmick off, to get back some of the counterblast you use for all these calling skills that I've mentioned earlier. So next, hit the camera again. Next, I run 4 Transient Revenger Masquerade, basically your 10k beat stick. So if you have Revenger Vanguard, he gains 3k. So this is for early game, attacker. So you can swing for 10k against grade 2s and grade 1s. Or let's say late game, if you're not attacker, you can just use him as attacker boosted by something and hit for 17k. Not again. So next, I run 4 Perfect Guards. Pretty self-explanatory. You run 4 Perfect Guards in every deck because Perfect Guards, because there is no need to explain. Yeah. And finally, for my last slot, I run 1 Revenger Darkborn Trumpeter. Her skill is that counterblast 1, when this unit is placed on the Vanguard or Rearguard, if you have a Shadow Paladin Vanguard, you may pay the cost, which is counterblast 1. If you do, search your deck for 1 grade 0 or less Revenger and call it to Rearguard as rest. So her skill is pretty interesting. You have a counterblast 1, you can call a grade 0 or less. Well, the thing is, it's a very cheap call. You counterblast 1 to get a free unit, a grade 0, but the problem is that it's at rest. But you still get a free unit, so it's pretty good. But I run her because I usually use her for a combo, which I'll explain later, and she's a 6k booster, so not really exactly ideal to run too many of her. And you don't want to keep calling grade 0s because essentially you are using up your triggers. So for trigger lineup, I play the standard 8 crit, 4 draws, and 4 heals. So this is the standard Raging Form build with 8 crits and 4 draws. You can swap out some crits for draws if you want to help you draw into Raging Form, for more consistency. But I like this. I like running crits because it's good for pressure, especially when you have Raging Form. Especially when you get a Drive Tech twice, you want to pump your Rearguards with criticals to push for game. Another alternate build which my friend did was more focused on drawing power. So I think he ran 8 draws, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he ran the other draw, Revenger draw art style, which strangely I don't have any. So he ran 8 draws, and he ran Skull Witch in the main, which I don't have because it's old and it's expensive. So essentially his deck revolves around drawing cards over and over and over again, and basically with that increased power draw, he's able to quickly draw into raging form, and at late game just spam his skill non-stop. And it's a pretty devastating deck because number one, you get big hand size for defense, and number two, you're able to access raging form a lot quicker. Although you have less crit pressure, but it doesn't matter because most decks nowadays, people expect you to run crit. They don't expect you to run lots and lots of draws. So in the current meta style, that deck actually ran pretty well. And I played with him, like during turn 2 or 3, you were able to get like 14 cards in your hand. Like, wow, it's crazy. Okay, so now with the general deck built out of the way, let's go to how to play the deck and some combos. Okay, so now I'll talk about how this deck is generally played, certain combos you can use, and how a general game would go, and how you generally want to play this deck. So, for your starting hand, ideally you want any grade 1, any grade 2, and ideally you want Moderate Phantom in your hand because Break Right. Ideally you want to start off with a Break Right to be able to use your Break Right skill. So, yeah, so that's it. So essentially, throughout the game, as you ride, you want to use units like Tartu to get free calls, and Revenger, Bastard Dart to control your field. So Tartu, usually when you call her, you can blast 2, you generally look for Doreen. And then you intercept her off, and then you get call, Bastard Dart Revenger in front of Doreen to unflip a damage. And so that's what you usually do with Doreen. A combo you can use with Bastard Dart Revenger and Doreen that some of you may not know is that you can use both of their skill if you have 2 counterblasts open, or even with 1 counterblast open and 1 flip. So essentially, when you call him out, due to Vanguard rules, both skills are activated at once. So let's say you have 2 counterblasts unused only, you can use, and you have no other damage, you can use Bastard Dart Revenger skills first, counterblast 2, retire something, and use Doreen skill to unflip. Or if you have one flip and 1 unflip, you can, when you call him out, you can use Doreen skill first to unflip, and then you flip 2 to use Bastard Dart Revenger skill to kill something. But in general, I don't really use his skill too much because you are generally running this, because this deck is quite counterblast heavy, so I generally use this combo just to unflip, to use counterblast to get free calls with Tartu or the Break Right or whatever. So generally what you do is you get Tartu, call him out, intercept her off, then usually when you Break Right, you counterblast 1 to call Bastard Dart Revenger out and unflip. So essentially you get a free unit from the Break Right. Yeah, and he gets 5k. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, yeah, you get 5k when the unit gets called out from Break Right skill. So yeah, and for example, let's say another way, let's say if you don't have any grade 2s in hand, and you don't mind losing a booster, you can use your starter to call a Bastard Dart Revenger to your field, and with Doreen you can unflip it. So essentially you are upgrading Doreen to Revenger for free. So that's another combo you can use with Doreen. Some situations that you can have would be, although it's quite unlikely, is possible. Doreen, let's say for example you have a field like something like this, yeah, and then you have some counterblasts and your counterblasts are all free to use, and your hand size is maybe small, and your field is pretty crappy because you're facing Kagero or Narukami. So what you do is you Break Right, call Tartu out, and then use Tartu to call Trumpeter. Use Trumpeter to call a grade 0 out as rest. So essentially, from this, counterblast 1 you call her, counterblast 2 you call him, counterblast 1 you call him. So all in all you get 3 units for counterblast of 4, which is pretty cheap. And it's not really a big deal for calling one trigger out of the deck because getting a free fuel is better than losing one trigger, which doesn't really affect your chance of getting triggered that much. And let's say you definitely need units to pull off your Raging Form skill, because if you have nothing out in the field, you can't use this skill because you need to retire 3. So there's one possible combo. So for Break Right, you generally want to call Lazard Revenger to unflip, or Tartu to call units up in case your field is pretty crappy, but make sure you call her on the column that's empty. Or you can call, if you're lacking an attacker, you can call Masquerade for a 12k attacker. So in general, when you attack, when you have Raging Form, you usually attack with your Rear Guard first, despite not having stand, and then you attack with your Vanguard boosted, because right now after he attacks, you need to kill off 3 units, so you definitely want to kill off rested units, not standing units, and you get the personal right him on top. Yeah, which is pretty which I think is pretty obvious, but I think some people, in the heat of game, they may forget. So that's the general order of, and sometimes, even if you do not have Raging Form in your hand, doing this order of attack can still, make your opponent think you have it in your hand. So it's sort of a psychological game. So because card games aren't just playing on the field, it's also psychological. So you want to trick your opponent to make bad moves, and then you can attack with this guy and you don't use the skill. But even if you have Raging Form in your hand, you don't have to use the skill. Depends on the situation. So this deck is pretty good because you can easily get consistent feel, with all this free calling you have, and you can also have, you can get field control with Lazard Revenger for just Counterblast 1 if you are in the same column as this unit, and you can also push for game with Raging Form, which is not actually that hard to pull off, as long as you have him in your hand, it's fine. And you can also actually use his skill after drive checking, because his skill states after the battle. So let's say he attacks, you drive check a Raging Form, you can just use the Raging Form to ride, because it goes in your hand. So yeah, that's generally how the deck works. It's actually a pretty simple deck, a pretty consistent deck. It's pretty good deck, and it has been topping Japan quite often, no surprise there. And thank you so much for watching. I'm trying this new format where, this format is new, so I'm not really sure if it's the best. So any comments, please leave it down below. And well, thanks for watching. This is LJS, and I'll see you guys next time.